Initially, my intention was to write a story about Victoria. The main obstacle being that I don't know what happened to the real Victoria, which I suppose from a fictional point of view opens a lot of freedom. I was very mindful of the fact that I wanted the event depicted to be historically accurate. So my starting point was to do a lot of research, and I was also very aware that Victoria could never be a construct or an archetype for Rwanda as a whole, or the experience of all people in Rwanda. That she can be only one experience, and that was my approach. I think the character of Aris I developed later, more in response to Victoria, but also as a way to show the misrepresentation that happened in the media and the thought process that happened, both the thought process of the author, and Iris being a journalist, and also the thought process in terms of discovering what caused the genocide, what facilitated the genocide, and who has a share of responsibility. Having decided Victoria was the main focal point, I did spend a lot of time doing some research. I spent probably about 6 months reading everything I could get my hands on. So I looked at reports from government, from NGOs, from Human Rights Watch. I looked at commission reports from the United Nations that were written retrospectively. I tried to find books about Rwanda, and the main one are the autobiography of Roméo Dallaire, who was the UN envoy in Rwanda at the time, who wrote a book aptly called Shaking Hand with the Devil, and the investigative journalism of Linda Melvin, who wrote 2 books about Rwanda, which, as far as I can tell, are the most comprehensive study on what happened and the origin of the conflict between the different parties in Rwanda. I found it very difficult to find first-hand experience from the victims themselves. And as time went on, I understood why. But initially, what struck me was that depending whether I was reading documents that had been compiled in French or in English, the narrative was very different and sometimes contradictory about who were the perpetrators or had done wrong. And it became obvious that there was an element of misrepresentation, and I didn't know at that point how willful that misrepresentation had been, or whether it was just people not doing their homework properly. As it turned out, in the end, it was a bit of both, really. And when in 2021 the Duclair report came out in France, it confirmed that for me. But it set me on a path I hadn't expected, which was to try and uncover the part of responsibility of the French government itself in the genocide in 1994, which as a French national was quite an uncomfortable place to be in, especially because my own father worked for the government at the time and would have been part of some of the conversation. And I think that aspect in a book with Aris and her relationship with her father is quite close to more to fiction and other aspects of the book.